Henry, thanks so much for joining CNBC. I really appreciate you coming on with us. I want to kick off by asking you to just walk us through your decision to leave the IMF negotiating team and whether or not you believe that this government is practicing criminal negligence, essentially, in their seeming refusal to get a deal done.
Thank you, Hadi, for having me. Listen, first, one quick note about my resignation. I don't think I resigned. I assume my responsibilities. I came on this team, and by the way, I was the advisor to the finance minister, not only on the IMF negotiation team, but I came and joined part of my time to help the Ministry of Finance on a reformist agenda. That reformist agenda encapsulated effectively an IMF program. This IMF program means two things. Number one, it means reforms, and it means reform in a number of areas. It's not only reform of the financial sector, which is what everyone wants to make this whole IMF program about, but it's also fiscal reform, it's also monetary reform, it's also governance reform, and it's also structural reform that the whole people of Lebanon have been asking for the longest time, and that the international community has been telling us for the last couple of years since saying, do reforms and we'll help you. As of yesterday, the French Foreign Affairs Minister went on in front of the French Parliament and said, please help us help you, help yourself so that we can help you. Now, how about the question of negligence? The negligence is all over the place in the political class. And I actually tweeted this last night, and I called all of them to resign because they are not assuming their responsibility just to go home and stay out of public life. Everyone, it's not only the government, so that we don't single out the government. I mean, Parliament has been responsible, also has a lot of responsibility in legislating. There is nothing that is being done. There's actually an alignment of stars, if you want, on the dark side of the room. There's the central bank on one side that wants to hide its losses, that doesn't want to talk about them. You have the banks that basically do not want to their capital to be touched, and they want to put the burden on depositors as opposed to take ownership and responsibility of what they've done. And you have the political class that itself doesn't want to do reforms. So it's an alignment of stars. They will give you lip service like they did for the last 30, 40, 50 years in this country, that they want reforms, that they want the IMF, that they want to fix the country, but obviously nothing is being done.
Henry, when you take a step back and think about this a bit more broadly, when you think about revolutions have their seeds in economics. When do you think we could see an implosion in Lebanon?
Well, the implosion has happened. And in my mind, the implosion in the street has not happened yet. But the economic, financial, social implosion.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question. That's a question that I keep on asking myself. Where is the civil society? Is it?
Because I was there, as you know, over the weekend,
Yes.
and it was eerily quiet.
It is horribly quiet, and I don't know what the trigger for people in the streets is going to be. But I honestly think this political setup that we have in this country cannot evolve. It needs a revolution, not an evolution, to move to the next stage in our political discourse. You see, the problem with this financial crisis is about managing losses, because the losses are there, right? So we can't hide them, even if we don't want to disclose them, but we cannot hide them. The political class that we have always...
I mean, you've got a central bank governor that's driving around now with armed security guards. I mean, very much like South America.
Yes.
I mean, how bad does it have to get before there is some actual movement toward reform?
Let me get back, and we can talk about the central bank governor, and we can talk about the security situation. But one thing I really want to say is that this political class, including the financial class, because by the way, Lebanon is a bankocracy. It's not a liberal economy. Right? It's the financial sector and the public sector mingled as one, and that's why we have this crisis. So these guys have been used to allocate profits, to divide profits. They don't know how to manage losses. And losses, I don't mean arithmetically, 100 divided by 5 equal 20. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Managing losses means building a new society, having a new social contract, figure out exactly who do we want to help? Do we really want to continue in a country that has 50% poverty, 40% unemployment, business closure every day to the largest. I mean, we just can't continue doing that. Now, about the security situation, obviously this social, the reason I talk about that we are already, the economic crisis has imploded, very simply because when you look at the statistics and you see how difficult this economic situation is on everyone, you will understand that the situation has imploded. The question is that this has not spilled over to the street yet. And that spillover will happen. I mean, will it happen when the dollar reaches, when the Lebanese pound reaches 10,000? I have no idea. When it reaches 15,000, I don't know. The currency is completely unanchored. As you know, the Lebanese army cannot eat meat anymore. So there is a real starvation that's going on of the people. And at some point, I don't know what will be the trigger. Things will go out of control. It may start with security skirmishes, and then it may very quickly go out of control.
When you think about this, I mean, Lebanon is as if they behave as if they're the grasshopper that sang all summer. And as you say, we've hit the wall at this point. But is there a country that benefits from this disarray? Is it Iran?
Look, the way I look at this, because I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and Lebanon is full of it, and it's typically always a symptom of countries that do not want to take their own responsibility, and Lebanon is one of them. It's always someone.
But doesn't Hezbollah directly benefit here just because they seem to be the only organized group in the country when it comes to helping basic supplies to citizens?
Look, I think I don't think Hezbollah benefits from that directly, and I don't think it's the only one that benefits from it. They may a little bit, other people do. The point of the situation is the following, right? We put the rope on our neck. We are the one who did it. Corruption, the situation that we have today is a situation that is the result of 30 or 40 years of crisis. Okay, Hezbollah, the Americans, the Iranians, whomever you want, are not the one that basically told us be corrupt, waste all that money, run the Ponzi scheme in the country. They didn't do that. So we put the rope on our neck, and it was so tight around our neck, so that now if someone like Iran does something, we say, oh, they are tightening the noose, and therefore they are taking advantage of it. Of course, regional powers, we don't live in vacuum, right? There's a regional conflict going on. There's a conflict between the Iranian and the Americans, and everyone is pulling the sheep to his side. But the claim that Hezbollah is going to take over the banking sector is only fear tactics. Now, there's no doubt that we have major differences with Hezbollah.
I mean, I don't know how they'd even do that, considering they're barred from international transactions.
That's exactly right.
But I mean taking over the country.
But look, the conflict with Hezbollah, and I think the former prime minister said it once extremely clearly, this is a regional conflict. Do not ask Lebanon to solve the Hezbollah problem. It cannot be solved. This will be a civil war. We don't want a civil war. It cannot happen. It's a regional problem. It will solve it regionally, and then you can ask Lebanon whatever you want in that particular chapter. But do not put us in the line of fire here, because it's impossible to solve it.
Is that what the Americans are doing by refusing to put out a helping hand economically?
No, I don't agree. I think the Americans are actually helping, and they are pushing Lebanon towards doing reforms. Look, we lied to the international community in Paris 1, in Paris 2, in Paris 3. We lied to them in SAD. We keep on lying to the Lebanese people since independence. Okay, so no, the Americans are not putting us in a corner. The Americans are the first trading partner. The Americans are the first nation that helps the Lebanese army. I don't agree with that. This is a friendly nation that is helping us, trying to do reforms. They are telling us this is the roadmap, okay? And now at the end of the day, if we don't want to follow the roadmap, it becomes our issue, not the Americans' issue.
What happens next with regards to the IMF? Because the conversations that I've had privately with them for the last several months, essentially they said, we're willing to help, but we have to be met halfway. And there was even some hesitancy, and I would even call it dread, amongst those that I spoke to within the organization about Lebanon really coming and committing to a reform, because they actually just don't believe it's enforceable.
Right. Look, I don't know to what extent the IMF negotiations are still serious. I mean, over the last 14 days, there has been maybe 2 sessions. I mean, don't quote me on that. I mean, you can quote me because I'm on TV, but
we're told that they will be meeting again next week.
yes, but I mean, you just talked about an imploding economic crisis. We just talked about a financial sector that is in complete disarray. Do you think that one meeting per week for an hour and a half is really what this crisis needs? I mean, this is not serious. This is not how it's going on. And the reason this pace was going on, I mean, it was a little bit at a faster pace before, but the reason this pace is very slow is very simple, is because we're still fighting about a diagnostic. You know, the IMF and financial experts and the government came up with a report and said, look, this country has a cancer. And we keep the parliament, as well as some politicians, the central bank and the banks are saying, no, we just have a tummy ache. Yesterday, a senior banker came out in the Financial Times and said very clearly, finally, one guy who comes out and says, if we were to apply international standards, we are all bankrupt. This is unfortunately the diagnostic. And the reason there is no progress, serious progress with the IMF is because we're still debating diagnostic. The real debate is going to be about protocol of solving the crisis. And there I can understand that different people have different ideas, but we cannot disagree about diagnostic. That's not a point of view.
Do you think that it's possible that we could see the end to the confessional system? And the reason I ask this question, obviously, and understanding all of the politics involved, you know, the Ottomans were able to essentially rule Lebanon by giving to the consular courts, to each independent community, their own, you know, I guess we would say, ability to legislate themselves. How far away are we, do you think, from that kind of a system coming back to the fore? Because it seems pretty obvious at this point that a central government is just not something that Lebanon is made to deal with.
Yeah, listen, the confessionalism is the problem number one in this country. That if you want to go back, at the end of the day, there's lots of technical solution to the economic crisis, but it starts with politics and ends with politics. And our political system is mostly a confessional system, okay? And that's the root cause of the problem. Now, the Constitution, by the way, asked for to have appointments outside of religious equilibrium. So, and that's Article 95 of the Constitution. There's a lot of civil movement. We are all calling for basically a civil society. Practically, how far can we go? I really don't know. I think our immediate fight today is about trying to figure out a solution to the financial crisis, a solution to the economic crisis, trying to get the economic machine working again. Otherwise, we're going to remain in confessionalism, because if we don't solve the crisis, guess what will happen? The biggest cost to this economy is going to be the brain drain, and there will be lines of people leaving the country. Wait until Europe opens up, or the North America opens up to people, and see what will happen. There will be lines at the airport of people wanting to leave the country.
Could that potentially be the best thing for Lebanon, considering how much remittances have meant to the Lebanese economy over the last several decades?
Well, I think that's a perverse way of looking at it.
I mean,
but
I mean, could we see a potential Monaco coming out of this?
Yeah, I mean, you could, but the problem is, I mean, for the people who are remaining here as a political system, as a civil society, it's a disaster.
There's no safety net.
Right?
Who's the biggest criminal? Are we talking about the central bank governor? Are we talking about the prime minister and his interim government? Who's the most at fault? Because when people come back to the streets with all of that anger, they're going to want to put that anger somewhere.
All of them. Honestly, I do mean all of them. Let's try not to have 50 different shades of gray. There's only one color, and they're all in the same bag. The central bank governor, of course, is responsible. He's responsible for building the Ponzi scheme. He's responsible for monetizing the debt. He's responsible for actually violating the law in terms of monetizing the debt, for lack of transparency. The government is responsible for not doing anything. Okay, there's a lot of reform that needs to be done. They're not doing it. I mean, they did few things, right? They took the Eurobond decision. They did the reform plan. They brought the IMF, but then they froze. They froze like a deer in the headlights. The parliament is responsible for dragging its feet and creating this whole circus in terms of the diagnostic and talking financial nonsense. So they're all responsible. The political leaders, I mean, there's no one leading the country. We're still in petty fights while people are really suffering.
Do you think that's going to change once the black market rate is over 10,000?
Well, I think the trigger, look, the only card that is remaining, let's not kid ourselves, is the street, are the people, right? The people have to express their opinion. If at the end of the day, the people want these guys to stay, I just pack my bags and go. I mean, that's fine. But I don't think this is what they want. Can we get early parliamentary elections? I don't think that we will be able to win that fight. So the next real election is going to be in 2022. And this is where the street is going to vote. I don't think, however, that the economic situation is going to allow us to wait until 2022. I think things are going to collapse in a big way before that.
Henry, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you. Thank you, Hadley.